Gentlemen, we are on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. In the middle of the Amud, we're talking about a new topic, which was the case of the Mishnah where the spleen is missing from the animal. That animal is still kosher. Okay, that's what we had said in the Mishnah. Amar Rav Avira Mishmei Derava, Lo Shanu Ela Nital, Aval Nikev Treifa. That's only when the spleen is missing. But if the spleen is punctured and it's still in the body, that is a sign of treifa, and the reason is because, and we can appreciate this medically as well, right? I mean, if a person has an infected spleen or a spleen that is leaking, then it could cause the entire body to become infected and will kill the patient. So that's true with an animal as well. So Masav Rabbi Yossi bar Abin Vitemer Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida, Chosech meubar shebeme'eha muter ba'achila, minat chula min aklayos asur ba'achila. We're going to learn about this later on in our Maseches, but essentially the discussion later on is about Aver min hachai, when you're eating from a live animal. Now, what the Gemara over there discusses is that, let's say a person goes in to a pregnant cow's uterus and cuts off a limb off of the fetus, and lets it remain there. Then goes ahead and shechts the mother. We know the halacha is that when you shecht a pregnant cow, you don't have to shecht the fetus. The fetus is considered to be kosher and shechted because of the mother. The halacha is that the limb also is part of the mother as well. So that's the chiddush, is that even though it's an amputated limb, it's still, since it's still in utero, is still considered to be part of the mother. Well, thank you so much for the fruit in honor of Tu B'Shvat, Mark. That's so kind of you. Okay, but the next part of the Brisa is another statement, and that statement is that min atchula min aklayos asur ba'achila. If there is let's say an animal sustained an injury such that its spleen was severed, just cut clean in half. So in that situation, the portion of the spleen that has been severed from the rest of the spleen is not considered to be kosher after the animal shechita. That portion of the spleen is considered to be aver min hachai. If you eat it, you're eating from a live animal because it was removed or severed from the rest of the living animal at a time when it was alive. Okay? So why there's a distinction between a severed fetus appendage and a severed organ is a different discussion. But bottom line is that what the Gemara is inferring from here is that only the severed portion of the spleen or the kidney is usur, but the rest of the animal is kosher. Ha-behema gufa sharya. So that implies that the rest of the animal is kosher, contradicting what you had just said, that a punctured spleen will render the animal a treifa. Here, if a piece of the spleen is cut, that's even worse than a puncture, as far as the ability to transmit the infection to the rest of the body, and yet we're still saying that the rest of the animal is kosher. So how do you reconcile that? So the Gemara's first answer is, no, hu hadin da'afilu behema nami asira, aidi de tana reisha mutter ba'achila, tana nami seifa asur ba'achila. So the first answer is very straightforward. In reality, the entire animal is treifa. But we wanted to create a contrast between the severed appendage of a fetus and the severed organ, the severed piece of spleen that is severed from the rest of the spleen. And we wanted to point out that whereas the severed appendage of the fetus is still part of the slaughtered animal's body, the severed spleen part is not part of the animal's body. But we're not commenting on the rest of the status of the rest of the animal. It could be that the status of the rest of the animal is a treifa anyway, when the spleen is cut in half. But we weren't commenting on that. We were just commenting on the contrast between the severed fetus limb and the severed spleen. The iba is same, but I'll give you another answer. If you're not happy with that answer, I'll give you another answer. The reality is that when the spleen is cut clean in half, maybe that the rest of the animal is kosher. The only time when an animal is treifa is when the spleen has been punctured, not cut clean in half. Why would that make a difference? Well, it could be is that I'm just conjecturing now based on my limited medical knowledge. When a spleen is cut in half, it just completely shuts down and stops functioning. And therefore, it's not emitting dangerous material to the rest of the body. But when a spleen is still functioning and it's punctured, it's leaking out whatever liquids are generated in the spleen, that could create toxic materials to develop in the body, and that's why it will render the animal a treifa. Okay, let's go on to the next case. The Mishnah had said that nitlu hakloyos, if the kidneys are missing. Now, we had pointed out yesterday from a footnote in the Art Scroll Gemara that in that illustrated CHULLIN Sefer, the author writes, based on conventional veterinary science, it is possible for certain farm animals to survive without kidneys. Even though humans can't survive without at least one kidney, farm animals can. They have other organs that compensate for the kidney functions. So that's why apparently the Mishnah says that an animal is not a treifa, even if both of its kidneys are missing. Amar Rachish bar Papa Mishmei Derav, Laksa Bakulya Echas Treifa. That Rachish bar Papa says in the name of Rav, that here we're not talking about missing kidneys, we're talking about an animal that develops a disease in its kidney. So if it has a disease in even one kidney, that renders it a treifa. Rashi says an example of that is that it develops pus in the kidney. And so that's a sign of infection or disease. Amri b'ma'arav v'hu dematoy lakusa l'makom charitz. And so in Eretz Yisrael, they qualify that halacha of Rachish bar Papa, and they say that that's only true if the infection has spread to the charitz, which is a groove that apparently connects the kidney to the rest of the body. V'heicha makom charitz, and where is that groove located? L'chivra detuse masni. It's in the white tissue that is underneath the loins. So if you detect infection or pus in that area of the kidney, so then that's a sign that the animal is a treifa. Ami Rebbe Nechunya she'iltinu lekulu tarofai de ma'arava v'amruli hilchasa karachish bar papa v'les hilchasa karav avira. He says, I asked all of the sages who were in charge of paskening the laws of treifa in Eretz Yisrael, and they said to me that as far as they're concerned, the halacha is like Rachish bar Papa, that a diseased kidney will render an animal a treifa, but we don't pasken like Rav Avira that a punctured spleen will render the animal treifa. They were more lenient by the spleen than we are by the kidney. And the Gemara says, Lo amran ela bekulshe aval besumche treifa. But that's only true that we're lenient by the spleen is if it's in the narrow part of the spleen. But if it's in the thick part of the spleen, the animal is still going to be a treifa. I don't know enough about the anatomy to tell you about the narrow part or the thick part.
It just shows you on the bottom of the art scroll that it's thin and it's thick on top.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Now, v'ishtayer beika ove diner zahav kishera. But as far as, again, we're going to qualify this law that the spleen will render the animal a treifa if it's punctured in the thick part. That's only true if the needle goes through to the exterior. But what if you do a post-mortem and you find that there's a needle inside the spleen, but that it doesn't protrude outside? So in that situation, as long as there's a gold dinar's coin width's thickness of tissue that separates between the tip of the needle and the outside of the spleen, then it's still going to be kosher. Now, Amri b'ma'arava kol haposel bereya kosher bekulia, shaharei nekev posel bereya v'kosher bekulia. So another statement made by the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael is that anything that disqualifies a lung to make a treifa is not a problem if that same symptom is found in the kidney. And the reason is, and sort of like the proof to that is that if there's a needle puncture in a lung, it renders the animal treifa. That's like a tubercular puncture, right? But if there is a needle puncture in a kidney, the animal is kosher. So you see that just because something is a sign of treifa in a lung, the opposite will be true in the kidney. The kol shekain heicha de kosher b'reya kosher b'kulya. And therefore it follows logically that if something is not a treifa problem in a lung, then surely it's not a treifa problem in a kidney. So maskef la Rabbi Tanchuma. So Rabbi Tanchuma challenges that assertion. He says, Uchlalahu, you mean to tell me that you can make an across-the-board rule that if something's okay by a lung, it's okay by a kidney? V'harei mugla de kasha bereyu pasal bekulia. But 1 second. there's a din of if you find pus in a lung, we learned it earlier in our parak, that animal's still kosher. But if you find pus in a kidney, that's a diseased kidney and it's puzzle and the animal is a treifa. And and also you see that pus is not comparable to clear liquid that you find in a lung and find in a kidney because they're both okay in that case. In other words, basically what he's demonstrating is that you can't make across-the-board rules that apply in all cases, that if X is true by lung, then Y is true by kidney. It doesn't work that way. There's so many different permutations and variables. Ela Omar Rav Ashi, Treifos kamedamis lahadadi, ein omrin betreifos zu doma lezu, sharichosu mikan umeisa, chosu mikan v'chaisa. He says you can't make these kinds of analogies from one organ to the other in the laws of treifos. And the proof is that if you cut an animal in one part of its body, it'll die as a result of that cut. If you cut an animal in another part of its body with the very same incision, it'll die. So therefore you can't be medama, you can't try to make these kinds of comparisons. Umayim zachim kesherim lo amran ela ditzili avalachiri treifa. And that which we said, that if you find clear fluid, both in the lung and in the kidney, it's kosher, that's only true where the liquid is completely clear. But if it's murky or cloudy liquid, so then that's a sign of treifa. And furthermore, even if you find clear fluid in both the lung and the kidney, sometimes it'll also be treifa if the water has a putrid smell. That's also a sign of some toxins or infection in the fluid, and that's a sign of a treifa. And then finally, the final discussion about a kidney is hakulya shehiktina bidaka ad kapol begasa ad ka'anov beinanis. Let's say you do a post-mortem and you open up the animal and you find that the kidney has shrunk. It's a very, very small size. So if it's an ovine animal, like a goat or a sheep, as long as it's the size of a bean, it's still kosher. And in a bovine animal, la behema gasa, as long as the kidney is the size of an average grape, then, I guess for the Middle East, then it's still kosher. Even though these are in parentheses, the Meforshim point out that they're in parentheses, these next words, because they were probably written by the Gaonim post-Talmudically, but they do shed light on the halacha, so let's just read it. Nita lechi hatachton. We had said in the Mishnah that if the bottom jawbone is missing or dislocated, so then the animal is a treifa. So the animal is still kosher. Amar Reb Zeira lo shanu ela sheyachol lichios al yedei leita v'hamra'a, aval ein yachol lichios al yedei leita v'hamra'a treifa. But that's only true if the animal can still eat. In other words, if the animal can't chew anymore because it doesn't have the use of its jaw. But let's say I can force feed it and stuff things down its throat. So the animal is not a treifa. But if the animal has so much damage to its entire facial structure that it can't swallow any longer, so then that's a sign that the animal is a treifa. It's not going to survive, and you have to be machmir. Next, nitla ha'em shala, if the animal's uterus is removed. Now, it's very logical why you would call a uterus an aim, because it's sort of like the mother of the fetus while it's in the body. So that's why a uterus is called an aim, a mother. So if an animal has a hysterectomy, it's still kosher. So the Gemara says, Tana hi ha'ein hi tarfachas v'hi shalfuchas. So the Gemara just points out that you'll find the word for uterus in different words are used to describe the same organ. Sometimes it's called aim, sometimes it's called tarfachas, and sometimes it's called shalfuchas. I don't know the etymologies of these words. They may come from foreign languages. The next thing that we learned in the Mishnah was v'charusa bidei shamayim keshera, that if an animal has a desiccated or dried out lung, but it was a result of a heavenly act, so then the animal is kosher. Now what do we mean by that? What we mean is that the animal became frightened. And apparently what the Mishnah is describing is that when a person, an animal, becomes scared, its lung will shrink and shrivel. However, the Mishnah qualifies that and it says that's only if it became frightened from an act of God. Let's say lightning and thunder, a tornado, or whatever it is. Earthquakes, right? But we'll see. We're going to qualify that if it happens some other way. So then it's not the shriveled lung will not be a sign of treifa. So the Gemara now says, Tana Rabbanan Ezehu Charusa. What is the definition of the word Charusa? So Kol Shetzam Karei Shala. Any animal whose lung has shriveled is called Charusa. Bidei Shamayim Keshera Bidei Adam Treifa. So if the shriveling of the lung happened because of a fright that was an act of God, the animal is still kosher. But if it was frightened by a human being, so then the animal is a treifa. Now, we're going to see how you know. But the question is, why should that be? It's just remarkable that they had this kind of veterinary knowledge to be able to make this kind of distinction. The next part of the Bryce is a little bit vague. It says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, af bidei kol habrios. This is true even if it's done by other creatures, the fright. Now the question is, this is true means what? This is true that it's kosher, or this is true that it's treif? So Ibayalu, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Aresha koyilu kula, o asefa koyilu chumra. Did he mean to say that if, let's say, a lion comes along and frightens my sheep, right, then if it has a shriveled lung, it's kosher, or if it has a shriveled lung, it's treif? Is that more analogous to an act of God, or is that more analogous to a human frightening my animal? So Tashma, the Tanya, Charusa bidei Adam Treifa, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, af bidei kol abrios. So the Brisa really clarifies it, because it starts off by saying that if an animal's lung was shriveled by man, the animal is Treifa. And Reb Shimon ben Elazar adds, and he says, not only if it was done by man, but even if it was done by another creature like a lion, that animal will also be a Treifa. So that clarifies that he's coming to be Machmir, and he's coming to say that even a lion, or another, ferocious animal that frightens my sheep and causes its lung to be shriveled is a treifa. Rabba bar Barchana have a ka'azal b'midbara ashka chanohu dichri ditsamik reyaditu. This sage was once traveling in the desert, and he found a group of rams who, after he shechted them, discovered that they had shriveled lungs. So asa shol bei medrasha. So he went to the base medrash to find out, how do I determine whether these shriveled lungs were a result of an act of God or an act of man? So Amrulei bekaita aisi mishichli chivri umalinhu maya kariri va'anchinhu me'es la'es ihadrin baryan bidei shamayim hi ukashera vilo treifa. So they answered him like this: it depends whether it's the summer or whether it's the winter. In the summer, you're going to need to take water that's a little bit cooler than the outside temperature. So take cool water from a well, fill it into a white earthenware vessel that will sustain the coolness of the water, and then stick the shriveled lung in there for 24 hours. If, after 24 hours, the lung reconstitutes and it's no longer shriveled, so then you know that it was shriveled as an act of God, and it's kosher. If, however, it remains in a shriveled state, then you know that it was fright caused by man, and it's treif. And besisva, I see mishichla shichume umalinu maya pishure va'anchinhu me'es la'es ihadra bari kashera v'ilo treifa. And if it happens in the winter that you need to do this test, so you're going to need to get the water a little bit higher than room temperature, because you need the water at a certain sort of like medium temperature. So fill up lukewarm water in a copper vessel so that it'll stay a little bit warmer than the outside temperature. Put the lung in for 24 hours and do the same test. If it reconstitutes and it loses its shriveledness, so then it's kosher. And if not, then it's going to be treif. Hagaluda. So the next part we learned in the Mishnah is that if an animal is skinned and doesn't have any more skin on, so then there was a machlokus in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir said it's kosher, and the Chachamim said it's treif. So Tanu Rabbanan Hagluda Rabbi Meir Machshir v'Chachamim Poslim, that if the animal is skinned, Rabbi Meir says it's kosher, the Chachamim say it's treif. U'chvar Heid Elazar Safra v'Yochanan ben Gudgida al Hagluda shepesula. And furthermore, we have actual testimony from these two sages that the animal is a treif. Meaning, what are they testifying? The animal can't survive once it has its skin removed. Amr Reb Shimon ben Elazar Chazer ba Rabbi Meir. So then Reb Shimon ben Elazar says in the Brisa that Rabbi Meir at one point retracted and acknowledged that the Chachamim were correct, that the animal is a treifa. So 1 second, Michlal Reb Shimon ben Elazar Polig Reb Meir Bigluda. So that implies that according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, at one time Rabbi Meir disagreed with the Chachamim and held that it was kosher. But we have a brisa that contradicts that, because V'hatanya Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar lo nechleku Reb Meir v'chachamim al gluder shepsula uchvar heid Rabbi Oshia ben Oshel Rabbi Yehuda haboisam lifnei Rabbi Akiva mishum Rabbi Tarfon al gluder shepsula. That the brisa says that Reb Shimon ben Elazar is quoted as saying that Rabbi Meir never argued with the chachamim, and he always agreed that the animal is a treifa. And these sages, the sage Rabbi Oshia, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, the perfumer, testified in front of Rabbi Akiva in the name of Rabbi Tarfon that a skinned animal is a treifa. Now, and then the last part of the brisa says, "V'im nishtayer bo kesela keshera," that even though we said that a skinned animal is a treifa, but if there's a small amount of skin left on the animal, the size of a sela coin, then the animal can regenerate its skin from that small patch of skin, and the animal therefore is still considered to be a kshera. That's the end of the brisa, but the problem is that we have a contradiction. Rav Shimon ben Elazar in the first brisa says that even though Rabbi Meir originally disagreed with the Chachamim, he later retracted and agreed. And the second brisa says that according to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Meir never disagreed with the Chachamim, and he always agreed that the animal's a treifa. So how do you reconcile it? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Milo nechlaku, lo amad Rabbi Meir b'machlukasa. The second brisa, when it says he never argued, it means that he never persisted in his argumentation. What that means is that originally he had held that the animal was kosher, but once it was testified to him that the animal can't survive, he did not persist in his disagreement. So it's not a contradiction. Okay. Amar Mar, im nishtayer bo kesela keshera. So let's go back to that line in the brisa that says that if a small patch of skin the size of a sela coin still remains, the animal is kosher, because like Rashi says, it'll be able to regenerate its entire skin from that one patch. So, which is an unusual, I don't know what the scientific reality is. So first of all, the question is, heicha, where does that patch of skin have to be in order for it to have that regenerative quality? Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, al penei hashedra kula. It has to cover the entire spine, the back of the animal. So, ibayelahu, da'arich bekatin dechim etzaref luhavi kesela, odilma berochav sela al penei hashedra kula. So the question is, what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that you only need a very, very thin strip of skin that goes along the entire length of the spine, such that if you were to reform it from a long and thin strip and make it into a size of a circle, the whole area of that thin strip of skin would be the size of a coin? So it's a very thin strip. Or are you meaning to say that no, along the entire length of the spine there has to be a thickness of skin along the entire length, that is the thickness, the width of a sela coin, which is a much bigger piece of skin? So which one is it? So let's answer that question. So Tashma, the parish Rabbi Nehoroi Mishmei de Shmuel berochav kesela al panei kol hashedra kulas. That Rabbi Nehoroi said explicitly in the name of Shmuel that it has to be the skin has to be the thickness of a coin along the entire length of the spine. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana Omar Rashi Prakim. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana disagrees, and he says as long as it's covering the joints of the animal, as long as you have skin covering the joints, it doesn't have to be on the spine, and it'll still be kosher. And Rabbi Lazar ben Antignos Mishum Rabbi Lazar ber Rebbe Yanai Omar Makom Tiburo. He says that no, as long as there's skin on the belly, on the pupik, like by the navel, then that's okay. That's enough to regenerate the skin. You don't need it on the spine. You don't need it on the joints. So boy Rebbe Yanai ber Rebbe Yishmael Nitol Makom Hashedra v'Kulo Kaim Nitol Makom Tiburo v'Kulo Kaim Nitlo Rashi Prakim v'Kulo Kaim Mai Teku. So now an interesting question is raised. What would happen if you have the converse? Let's say, according to the opinion that you need the skin on the spine, let's say the animal is completely covered with skin and only the skin on its spine is missing. Or let's say the animal is completely covered with skin except for the area around its pupik, right? What will be the din there? The Gemara says we're not sure. Clearly, according to these different opinions, skin in those areas is more vital than skin anywhere else. But that doesn't necessarily mean the converse, that if the skin there is missing but you have skin everywhere else, the animal is a treif. Amar Rav, kol ha'or kulo matzil bigaluda, chutz me'or beis ha'prasas. So now Rav says that all of the skin, Rav argues with all of the previous opinions, and he says no matter where you find a patch of skin, that will save the animal from being a treifa, except if you find skin on its shins. If you find skin on its shins, that skin is not thick enough and is not skinny enough, skin-like enough, in order to regenerate and spread over the rest of the body. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu or beis haprasos nami matzil. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees, and he says, no, even if the only skin that's left on the animal is on its shins, that's enough for the animal to be kosher because it'll regenerate. Ba'amine Rabbi Asi me Rabbi Yochanan or beis haprasos mahu sheyatzel begluda Amar le matzil. So then the Gemara relates a story that Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yochanan's student, once asked him, if the animal only has skin on its shins, is that enough to save the animal and render it kosher? And Rabbi Yochanan said, yes, that's fine. So Amar le limadatanu Rabbeinu elo sha'oroseyam kibisaran. But Rebbe, you taught us to the contrary. You taught us that there are some types of skin that are not like skin, but are rather like flesh. And where is that? Or beis haprasos. You said shin skin is more like flesh than it is like skin. And so how could you contradict yourself if you're telling me that shin skin is more skin-like, and here you're told us that shin skin is more meat-like? So Amar lei al takniteni shebaloshon yachid anishona osa. So Rabbi Yochanan says, don't hack me a chinik. He says, when I told you that shin skin is more meat-like than skin-like, that was only going according to one opinion that I don't paskin like. Because what brisa was I quoting? D'Tanya, Hashochet es ha'ola lahaktir kizayis me'or shel tachas ha'aliyah chutz le'makomo pasul ve'ein bo kares chutz lizmano pigul v'chayav and olav kares. Now, it's in the context of kadshim. We go back to our studies of Maseches Zvachim, and we remember that if a person shechts an ola, which is meant to be burnt on the mizbeach, right? If he shechts an ola, and while he's shechting it, he's having a machshava pesula, he's having a disqualifying thought. He says to himself, I'm going to offer a kazayas of this animal's meat, either outside the temple or at the wrong time. So if he has that machshava pesula, he's pasul the entire animal. Will he be subject to kares? It depends. If his machshava is chutz l'makomo, in the wrong place, then there's no kares. But if it's chutz lizmano, that's pigul, if it's to offer it at the wrong time, then he is subject to kares. Now, we said it's got to be a kazayas of meat that he plans to offer either outside or at the wrong time. What if he thinks about a kazayas of skin? So then that's not enough. Unless, says the Tanakama, it's the skin that's right underneath the tail of the animal. Because that skin is very soft and tender, and you can actually eat it like you eat meat. It's like chicken skin, you can eat it. Whereas the rest of the skin is not normally edible. So therefore, even if you only think about the kazayas of skin underneath the tail, that you're going to do it chutz lizmano, chutz l'makomo, you have pasel the karba. But on that, we have a couple of yechidim who add different kinds of skin as well. Eliezer ben Yehuda ish evalim omar mishum Rabbi Yaakov, v'chein haya Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda ish ichos omar mishum Rabbi Shimon, echad or beis haprasos, ve'echad or harosh shel egel harach, ve'echad or shel tachas ha'alya, v'chol shemanu chachamim gabetuma, elu she'oroseim kivisaran. So these two sages said that it's not just the tail skin, but it's also the shin skin, and also the soft skin that's on the head of a calf. If you have a machshava pesula on those kinds of skin as well, you have also disqualified the karban. And we're also including other types of skin that are more like meat than they are like skin. Now, what is that last phrase coming to include? So, lahavi or beis haboshes. So it's coming to include vaginal skin of the animal. And the reason why it wasn't mentioned explicitly, Rashi and Tosfos point out, is because since a korban ola is normally a male animal, there's nothing to talk about of having skin of that type, but it's telling you that in other areas of halacha, potentially, that skin has the same din as basar, has the same din as meat, not has the same din as skin. And the bottom line is that what we're demonstrating from this brisa is that that's a das yachid. There's the chachamim hold that only the skin underneath the tail has the din of basar and not the din of skin. But the skin of the shins, really, according to the Chachamim, is bona fide skin, just like any other part of the body. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan said that even if this skin of the shin is still there, that's good enough and it can regenerate the rest of the skin on the body. It's only according to a couple of individuals who hold that the shin skin is more like meat than like skin. So therefore, chutz lemekomo pasl vein balkaris, chutz lezmanu pigul v'chayavan levkaris. So therefore, according to these yechidim, these individual sages, not only shin skin, but also these other kinds of skin, if you have a machshava pesula, if it's chutz lemekomo, if you're thinking about offering it outside the temple, so then it's pasl, but you don't get karis. If it's chutz lezmano, then you pasl the korban, and you also will potentially get karis. And this is where we'll hold it for today. Wishing you a wonderful day. And